Peter Tilden.
Talk Radio 790 KABC. Peter Tilden at 10 continues. Don't forget, our own John Phillips is in Philadelphia covering the convention. He's on with Doug in the morning, and he's on in the afternoon. And our own Brian Claypool, attorney, litigation, and civil rights law, representing the clients in Miramonte, is on with us now. You know from Philly, because you went to Villanova, right?
Pardon me?
You went to Villanova, didn't you?
Yeah, I went to Villanova. Absolutely, I went to law school at Villanova.
So you're watching the meat and cheesesteaks on Philly at Del Sandro's, and I'm cracking up.
Yeah, I had to do a lot of working out when I was in law school.
I figured.
On the cheesesteaks in South Street's the place to go in Philly for the cheesesteaks.
Well, there you go. And Dino, who's from Philly, and I'm from Philly, in the headphones just said to me, I was just back there, and I ate butterscotch shrimp, a ton of tasty cakes, which we know from, too.
That's great.
It's an interesting city. So we got a lot of legal issues to talk to you about. I love getting you on, Brian, because you're so knowledgeable. Number one, Governor Jerry Brown denied parole for former Manson family member Leslie Van Houten. And when this came up, the story came up, and I had her attorney on. He sounded like a nice guy, talked about everything she's done in prison, and I got off the air, and I said on the air and to my wife, it's never happening. She's never getting out because there's no upside for Jerry Brown to let her out, and something happens, and he wants that, a high-profile prisoner released. Is that the reason? Is that what governors look at? They do the Ben Franklin ledger sheet and just go, why? Why would I do this?
Well, I believe that is the case, sir. I think that Brown's decision to not let her be paroled is politically motivated, because a lot of your listeners might not realize this, but when she went through 3 trials. Her first trial, I believe she was convicted. It was overturned. She went through a second trial. There was a hung jury. That third trial, she's convicted, but she's only sentenced, I hate to use the word only, but 7 years to life. Now, usually when you have 7 years to life, most unknown inmates or convicted felons would get out after they serve, 3/4, 15, 20 years.
Sure.
They're going to get out on parole. So why is she not getting out on parole? Because this would be a blemish. Anybody associated with Manson is going to stay in prison for the rest of their lives. And I've looked at this back at the history. I don't think it's fair, because I think she has exhibited an ability to be remorseful, to do meaningful work in prison, and she was not the person that spearheaded these murders.
But in reading, and I read Brown's decision, and he put a lot of stuff in there, the shocking nature of the crime, on and on and on. But it didn't matter. I kept saying to my wife, she's never getting out. Brown is not. There's no upside for Jerry Brown to let her out of prison. Doesn't matter. So he said that he doesn't think that she showed the proper remorse, etc. The shocking nature of the crime, because she did stab someone in the back at least 14 times. But supposedly she was under the influence of acid, etc. But I looked at this from the beginning, and I guess as your attorney, you do your best that you can, but it's just not happening. It's never happening.
Well, it's not happening here, Peter, because Leslie Van Houten's name ought to be Charles Manson. In other words, those names are interchangeable here.
Yep.
When Brown is looking at paroling Leslie Van Houten, he is seeing through a prism Charles Manson. So he's got to make the decision to not parole her. The repercussions would be just insurmountable for him. And that's really tragic. Look, I'm not here to obviously advocate anybody committing a crime this heinous, but again, as a criminal, I do criminal defense work as well. We had you got to put this back in the context. She didn't participate in the first set of murders. In the second set, she's 19 years old. She's apparently on LSD. And she now has shown remorse years later. She's been a model prisoner. So any other prisoner would have been paroled. That's the tragedy.
But if you do Manson, it sucks to be in the Manson family, but you're not getting out. I don't think none of them have ever gotten out, correct?
No, I absolutely. None of them have gotten out, and none of them will get out, because again, the picture screen you're looking at is Manson. It was so heinous, and if you have any affiliation with him, you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison.
All right,
politically, I guess that's correct, but I think in the realm of our justice system, and I don't think it is correct. It's incorrect.
I figured you'd go that way. Now, Brian, I'm dying to talk to you about this. Brian Claypool, attorney, litigation, and civil rights law. Dennis Hastert, I know you got something to say about this. The former speaker is in prison, and there's a lawsuit that claims he should pay the full $3.5 million he agreed to silence a former student athlete. in this sex abuse that was decades ago, right? And he's in prison. He doesn't want to pay the rest of it. The 1.8 million, the guy wants plus accrued interest as part of an out-of-court settlement that the two privately made years ago. Hastert already paid him 1.7 million during a 4-year period. What happens to this? This is a bizarre twist.
Yeah, it's a real challenging case for the judge from a legal perspective. So if you're representing Hastert, his lawyer is making the argument that if you enter into an oral agreement that requires payments that go beyond 1 year, which is the case here, that it has to be reduced to writing, and there is nothing in writing to confirm this. Therefore, it's an unenforceable agreement. That's really the biggest and best argument that Hastert's lawyer can make. Now, if I'm another argument they're making too is, well, this part of the agreement was this young man was not supposed to divulge the sexual assault. That argument will never work because the victim only mentioned this during a federal investigation.
Right.
So that's not snitching on somebody. You have to tell the truth in a federal investigation. Now, if you're representing the victim here, here's an argument I thought of that may work. You can argue to get around this 1 year that has to be in writing. You can argue what's called breach of an implied contract. In other words, you can create a contractual relationship through what's called course of conduct. In other words, if you have a pattern and practice and a history of conduct, that creates a new agreement that you've got to honor. So what I'd argue here is, hey, wait a minute. Hastert's made all these payments for the previous years. I think it was like 1.6 or 7 million.
Right.
He's already made the payments beyond a year, Peter, right?
Yep.
Number one. And then number two, he arguably has waived his right to challenge this agreement because he has continually made these payments, and he didn't stop making the payments until the bank. Remember, there were suspicious activities within his bank account.
Yeah, it's what he got nailed for. Yep.
Yeah, so I think that it's going to be a tough call, but I think if you've got a judge, this could boil down to, Peter, what we were talking about with Jerry Brown, right? This could be, do we have a judge that's really an advocate for kids and wants to prevent future molestation? If there's a real passion and a mission there, maybe this judge will find a way through what I just said, through past history, course of conduct, that it is an enforceable agreement and Hastert needs to pay the penalty. You got a judge that could care less about that. He might just leave this to a legal argument and then rule in favor of Hastert.
But what a creepy. I mean, this whole the crime, the fact that he only got busted for taking money out and lying to the FBI about that, and not the 5 former students involved in the wrestling program.
Right. Well, that's kind of like the OJ. It's kind of like the OJ thing.
Yeah.
Right? OJ doesn't go to jail, right, for murdering Nicole Brown Simpson, right?
He goes
he goes to jail later for another crime.
Getting the stuff.
Here, like an idiot. Yeah. Why he lies in a federal investigation about all these withdrawals he's making from his bank, and that's why he's going to spend at least 8 months in jail. The
other thing that's amazing about the Hastert case that's so disgusting for me, above and beyond, is here he was. There's a wrestling teacher, so you make no money, and then you're the speaker, and you make a salary, but it's not a huge amount of money. Somehow has all this money when he gets out of Congress to pay off $1.7 million, and I got $5 million here, and I got $3 million there, and I got $9 million. It's amazing how he enriched himself through public service. Kind of stunning.
Yeah, that's a great question, and to use and then to go one step further, to use that money that he's made from being a public servant
to pay off
to silence a victim of sexual assault is mind-boggling.
Yes,
and it's very troubling.
Yeah,
and I really hope. Me, having been a child advocate and representing victims of sex abuse, I'm really hoping this judge finds a way to hold him accountable and pay off.
Me too. He's an animal. All right, here's a big one, and so many people have this procedure, and we've heard about it, where they put the scope down to look in your esophagus into your down to your whatever, to your kidneys, your kishkas. This outbreak, Olympus basically told U.S. executives no warning about the tainted medical scopes was needed. It looks like they knew because they had problems in Europe, and yet they told the people here who were in charge of this market, the United States, after outbreaks of infection over there and death, that no, you don't have to tell people about that. 35 people died since 2013, 3 at UCLA's Ronald Reagan Medical Center. And we have this on the medical show every week where people ask, is it safe to have the procedure? Because they don't know how to clean duodenoscope that well. It's used in about 700,000 procedures annually in the United States. So it's just a small portion. But if they knew, because of their information in Europe, this is a huge case, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. If you can prove they had knowledge, then that creates a duty to warn patients who are considering the procedure of the risks, plain and simple. I mean, this is really common sense. It's not even, you don't even need your legal hat for this.
Yeah.
So on top of that, though, I mean, I'm thinking too, is there some kind of criminal, repercussion too? If people die as a result of you, the manufacturer, not disclosing a known risk, shouldn't you have some sort of culpability? In other words, how do we stop this from happening again?
Yeah.
As you know as well as I do, Peter, I've been in the civil forum too. I've won big judgments against cities, school districts, you name it. But does that always translate into changed policies and procedures to stop this from happening again? And I'm wondering if this is not the poster child case to use, where there should be some kind of criminal investigation and hold some of these executives criminally culpable to make sure that lives are not lost in the future. Because otherwise, again, these companies have large insurance policies. Let's say they get sued civilly. Their insurance companies are going to pay it out. You think they really care about that?
Well, they
don't.
To be crass about it, a lot of companies work that into the cost of doing business. We're going to be sued this many times. It's going to be that. So.
That's a great point. So unless their scalp is in this and they face
good point, Brian. Hey,
Yep.
Brian, with 2 minutes left, and this is a big story, but it's got to be addressed. The Vernon Battery Recycler was there for 30 years, allowed to recycle, and they've contaminated with lead, apparently, over 100 times above health limits to such a huge swatch of L.A., and so many houses now with kids are being told in East Los Angeles places, don't let your kids out. They can't play out there. And you know what lead, just trace elements of lead, can lead to drastic results.
You, I read your story and was almost in tears. It reminded me in many respects of Flint, Michigan, Miramonte. And real quick, let me tell you what I mean by that. This never happens in Beverly Hills. I guarantee you this would never happen. This happens where you have lower income to middle income, some impoverished folks. You have ethnic folks who can't stand up for themselves or who are afraid, like in Miramonte, to stand up against the government, or who possibly may have some immigration issues and they are afraid to fight the government. And trust me, the manufacturer, excise, local government, for example, Peter, did you see that I think the county of LA hired some lawyers to do some testing, and they won't release the results of that testing?
Because they're saying they're claiming confidentiality.
Right, but that's the problem we had in Miramonte and in Flint, Michigan. You have lack of transparency. You have no watchdog to make sure there is transparency. I'm telling you, I've been in the trenches. When a big business or a municipality suspects that the consumer is, for example, here, a lot of Hispanic families who are not used to fighting for their rights. They're the underdog. They're the victim. They're silenced. They're afraid. That when they see that these businesses and local governments and state governments here too, they become predatory. And I'm telling you, when I read this story, what hit me first is this is ethnically motivated. This never happens in a higher income white neighborhood.
And by the way, it affects thousands of homes, correct?
I'm literally shocked from this story. It potentially affects thousands of people. And what about that? Did you see, Peter, like one of the daycare centers? They probably had toxic lead in the backyard where kids are playing. Nobody from local or state government has come in to clean up the problem and help them. And you know what they did? They just threw some green grass, some new grass.
Yeah, to cover up.
Some turf over top that.
Brian,
to try to prevent the lead from being inhaled by the kids.
It's horrific.
Is this a civilized society?
We got to go, but this is a big story that's not going to go away. You're going to be reading about this for a long time because it's going to blow up huge now that, to quote Donald Trump, huge now that it's percolating and people are starting to realize how much pollution there is from this one Vernon Battery Recycler. It was there 30 years. Brian, always a pleasure to have you on. A litigation civil rights attorney, represented the clients of Miramonte Elementary School molestation case and so many others, and I appreciate you coming on and answering some of our legal questions for us.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. Absolutely. Take care. Brian Claypool. We'll be back. Talk Radio 790 KBC.